we've been talking about Florida for a while now. There's actually a dedicated playlist on my channel. It's called the Fascism Nexus or something like that, because Florida has been kind of leading the way in all this anti-trans. We're passing laws, we're restricting access to care, we're doing all this crazy stuff. So you're welcome to check out that playlist if you want to catch up on everything that we've talked about so far. But to recap briefly, some of the things that they've done are prohibiting minors from accessing care, which generally speaking, this gets struck down under the 14th Amendment because generally cis kids are still allowed to use puberty blockers. So you're denying someone care based on who they are and not any real reason. And you're not allowed to treat people differently under the law. And they've also done stuff that restricts the access of adults. Like, for example, they changed the requirements for adults. So tons of trans people get our care from a nurse practitioner. And they changed the requirements basically to where you have to get it from an actual doctor. Like Planned Parenthood has a lot of nurse practitioners working there. And they've restricted these things to say, yeah, no, you have to see like a doctor. And there are obviously fewer doctors, and you might have to travel further. And they might be full up in their schedule and not even have time for you. So there are trans people who are like adults who've lost access to their health care because of that restriction. And another thing they did is they just stated that it is not medical care and therefore Medicaid won't cover it. Medicaid is the state insurance. So maybe you can't afford private insurance, you are low income. The state is just like, no, we're not going to cover this. It's not medically necessary. We've just decided. These things have been working their way through the courts, and we've had some good news this time. Okay, are you ready? When in Florida, restrictions on providing gender-affirming care to trans youth and adults have been found unconstitutional after a full trial and are now permanently enjoined. Huge win by Simone Chris and Southern Legal Counsel. So it's a class action lawsuit. It presents a constitutional challenge to a Florida statute and rules that 1, prohibit trans minors from receiving specific kinds of widely accepted gender-affirming medical care, and 2, impose restrictions on how such care can be provided to adults or to minors who are grandfathered in and who are allowed to continue receiving care they were receiving before the statute and rules took effect. The case has been tried to the court. This court has set out the conclusions. Florida statute is unconstitutional to the extent it prohibits gender-affirming care for individuals who have reached or passed Tanner Stage 2, that's a certain stage of puberty. This Florida statute is unconstitutional to the extent that it prohibits a licensed individual acting within the scope of the license from 1, assisting a supervising physician in administering or performing gender-affirming care, or 2, filling a prescription issued by a physician or for adults issued by a licensed individual acting within the scope of the license, or 3, providing gender-affirming care to adults. So yeah, just basically laying out, this is within the scope of care that these people are equipped to give. Like if a nurse is able to dole out all these different prescriptions, generally under the supervision of a physician, you're allowed to administer, if you're allowed to administer the same medication to a cis person, but you've denied them the ability to issue it to a trans person, again, why is that different? Under the law, it's not. It shouldn't be. Hey, you should like, comment, and subscribe. And you can hit up the Patreon or maybe buy one of these hoodies that I'm wearing because it's good merch. Do it. Do it for the cat. Do it. This other statute is unconstitutional to the extent it authorizes disciplinary action or makes it a crime to violate a provision of a statute or rule this order declares unconstitutional. So, yeah, they're trying to basically take away people's medical licenses if they were to continue providing this care. These other administrative rules are unconstitutional to the same extent as the previous and also as set out in these other paragraphs. And I think that's all that she provided on here. Is there anything else over here? No. We could go and read the entire full decision and go into all the details. But basically, with this one challenged statute prohibits gender-affirming care for minors under the age of 18, subject to a grandfather provision allowing minors to continue to do so who had already received the care. The statute does not prohibit, but instead only imposes restrictions on care for adults. But all this was found to be unconstitutional. This is 100 pages. One noteworthy thing in here, it says, gender identity is real. With extraordinarily rare exceptions not at issue here, every person is born with external sex characteristics, male or female, and chromosomes that match. As the person goes through life, the person also has a gender identity, which is a deeply felt internal sense of being male or female. For more than 99% of people, the external sex characteristics, chromosomes, natal sex match the person's gender identity. For less than 1%, the natal sex and gender identity are opposites. This order refers to these people as transgender. The elephant in the room should be noted at the outset. Gender identity is real. The record makes this clear. The defendants, speaking through their attorneys, have admitted it. At least one defense expert has also admitted it. That expert being Stephen B. Levine, Dr. Stephen B. Levine, the only defense expert who has actually treated a significant number of trans patients. At least in his first appearance as a witness, he addressed the issues conscientiously on the merits rather than as a biased advocate. He was not as forthcoming in his second appearance in this trial, but he explicitly stood by the prior testimony, and he again acknowledged that gender-affirming care is sometimes appropriate. The defendants have explicitly admitted that prohibiting or impeding individuals from pursuing their transgender identities is not a legitimate state interest. Yeah, the defendants themselves. The record shows beyond any doubt that a significant number of legislators and others involved in the adoption of these rules at issue pursued this admittedly illegitimate interest. For some, the denial that trans identity is real is not different in kind or intensity from the animus that has attended racism and misogyny, less as time has passed, but still today. And some transgender opponents invoke religion to support their position, just as some once invoked religion to support their racism or misogyny. Transgender opponents are of course free to hold such beliefs, but they are not free to discriminate against transgender individuals just for being transgender. So yeah, this keeps going for a long time, but that was, I think, the segment that was most worth looking at. Just like gender identity is real. And the defendants, in this case, like the defendants refers to the state of Florida, basically. They were admitting, that there isn't like a state interest in this. There isn't like a particular state reason to limit this access. No vested interest. Excuse me. That's an interesting point. These laws also make kids on puberty blockers who are on them for cancer or hormonal conditions like intersex conditions might now face survival guilt. Eric says, my partner is dealing with that as a survivor of an aggressive childhood cancer. Imagine having so little empathy, you not only take medical care from trans kids, but while you're forcing intersex kids to have them, you are traumatizing kids on the same meds for cancer or hormonal issues. Yeah, to say, oh, yeah, I was given this care, but trans kids are being denied it. Wild. Yeah, I'm sure Meatball Ron is so happy about this. So good news, everyone, from the state of Florida. It sucks there, but at least the courts are making this make sense. Now, we always have to end these segments by pointing out that this does not necessarily mean that the court case is going to stop here. This case comes from the Northern District of Florida, Tallahassee Division, and it could get appealed to the state Supreme Court, and it could get appealed to the District Appeals Court, and then it could get appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So this doesn't necessarily mean that it's over unless the state Supreme Court and the appeals court, they just go, well, no, we're not going to see this. We've decided that the lower court ruled correctly on this, but there is always a chance with these things that it could work its way up over the next couple of years to this level of Supreme Court. And that might not be great, but at least for today, it's a win. We can hope. Again, 14th Amendment, you should not be able to treat people differently under the law just because of who they are. It should be a pretty open and shut case. So yeah, happy Pride. Wow. Aren't we so happy? Amazing. Happy Pride to my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Jack, Amanda B., Wellington Marcus, Michelle Frateroli, Michelle Winter, Danielle McDonald, Jamie Jam, DZXN, Nova, Sojo, Athiet, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Desi Quiche, Pasnell Infinity, Celeste, Kevin Young, Elizabeth Bartell, Liam Hodgson, Ella V. Nobody, Mr. Atheist, and Suzanne Maynard.